Yes, hello there. I am Kyle Russell, and you are tuned in to the very first of the Why It's Awesome series. Now, last year I did a bunch of 1-hour webinars. They're very informative and they cover topics like how to meditate with crystals, how to work with crystals, crystals on Pinterest. I even get into a very specific one about amethyst called Amethyst and the Purple Sages of the Higher Spirit. So I'm really happy that you've joined me today because this new series is meant to be shorter, only about 30 minutes instead of 60 minutes. And it's meant to be a little bit more fun, a little bit more flexible, a little bit more improvised. And one of the things that makes it great is that you can submit your questions. You might notice there's a chat box on the side here, and I am open to receiving, entertaining, and responding to whatever questions make sense and are pertinent to the topic for tonight. And tonight's topic is fluorite. So I call the whole series, or this episode, edition of the series, Crystals, Fluorite, as part of the Why It's Awesome series. And the reason I put this together for you is that it's a way that you can get introduced to me. I'm Kyle Russell again. I have two websites. One is called crystalconcentrics.com, and that's the one that focuses, it has my blog, it has my services listed, so it's more about the modality, the healing modality of working with crystals. And the other site that I have is powerstonecrystals.com. And that site is devoted specifically to selling crystals, because I have two goals and sort of ambitions in this work that I'm doing. One of them is to share my own unique view and perspective on how to work with crystals, how to understand them, the language of crystals, if you will. And I even did a webinar called Crystal Visions, where, well, that was the history. I have so many webinars. You should check out my links. They'll let you know what there is to choose from. Today, I want to really focus on fluorite and why, in fact, it's awesome. So, I'm glad to see Sylvia's here. Thank you, thank you. She's glad to be here. And so I'm going to be sort of glancing over and sort of giving you live response to the questions as I see them coming, while trying to keep a common thread with the topics I want to cover. Now, one of the things that is problematic with fluorite is that it can break easily, and that is the reason why it's not carved into jewelry or made into jewelry. And you might see my pendant here. It sure looks a lot like fluorite, but it's actually a prehnite. And of course, if I could have a fluorite pendant, you know I'd be wearing it. But the flip side of what's strange about fluorite, in fact, the fact that it breaks, unlike a lot of the gems, is that it breaks. And as a result of massive fluorite breaking, it's possible to chisel it just so to create a perfect octahedron. Now, there are a few other crystals that form into octahedrons, and what I like about the octahedron is that it's an upward pyramid and a downward pyramid. So what that means to me is that the octahedron represents a balance of heavenly energy and earthly energy, or energy going up to heaven and coming down from heaven. So it's a very mystical and holistic symbol. Now, I always thought of these as being naturally formed like this, but it so happens that whenever you see this shape, unless it's been polished into this shape, and that is actually quite common too, it's because someone knew what they were doing and they just chipped a chunk of massive fluorite just so and broke off some perfect octahedrons. Otherwise, you're going to see fluorite form more like this. It's a little bit geometric, it's a little sort of circular, and that is a common occurrence for fluorite in nature. Now, one of the things that I believe, and if you do check out my other webinars, you'll see if a stone is more translucent, that tends to mean that it has more to do with the spirit world, because our spirit can sort of travel through things and go through dimensions in time. We can think into the future, we can think into the past, and stones that are not translucent tend to be more sort of one-dimensional. They're in the present only. And what's great about fluorite is there are 5 main varieties that I'm going to talk about, and about half of them pertain to the body and half of them pertain to the spirit. Now, because it's translucent and because fluorite in general is a more spiritual stone, it's going to appeal to a little bit more of a spiritual dimension of the different chakras that it's playing with. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the body fluorites first. And I'm going to begin actually with pink fluorite here. Now, this is a magnificent cluster. It's actually kind of interesting too, because right along here, you can see that one cluster, the top cluster, has formed over smaller crystals of a secondary, or probably the original cluster underneath. And what I like about this, aside from the color being phenomenal, is you can see some natural octahedrons forming, but mostly what you see is the pyramid, the vertical part coming up. And the pink fluorite, sometimes called lavender fluorite, is of course going to appeal into the heart chakra. I have my own system. I created a poster. It features 29 different stones, and it divides the whole chakra system into 4 main components. And one of them, of course, is the heart chakra. And so this, the pink fluorite, is actually associated somewhere between rose quartz, which is a stone of unconditional love, and kunzite, which is a higher spiritual love. So the pink fluorite has that sort of quality of being in between those 2 other ones. The next fluorite I'd like to show you is lavender fluorite. Now, you normally only see this polished, and it's very different from any of the other fluorites. It's got, you know, you're going from whiter color more towards purple, but it has a touch, a feel to it that's very, very soft. And even though it's purple, which is generally associated with the higher chakras, it sort of taps into the heart chakra and would most easily be associated with jade in terms of being an emotional relaxer. It always takes me down a few rungs. And when I work with clients, either in person or long distance, I often start with a pair of these lavender fluorites. And this is more appropriately called lavender than some of the pink material, even though that pink is kind of lavender in its own right. But if I show the 2 of them together at the same time, you'll see there's a pretty substantial difference. So this is pretty hard to find, the pink fluorite. And this is a little easier to find. Sometimes you'll get lucky and find some little polished eggs of this material. But I tend to buy everything I can of it because part of my mission, in addition to sharing what I know and the perspectives that I have that are unique and different about crystals, is I'm interested in sharing the actual crystals, because I think there's a lot of material out there that is not as great as it might be. And so I pick through thousands and thousands of crystals in order to pick out the very, very best material that I can for my customers who are either live in person at my showroom or at metaphysical expos that I do, or long distance. I love working with people online, giving them advice about crystals, and hooking them up with really awesome ones. Now here's another interesting crystal. You'll see it has some purple striations running through it. And this is technically lavender, but it's not as soft in vibration as the other one. It's somewhere between lavender and purple. And we're going to talk a little bit more about purple lavender later. So moving from the heart chakra into the solar plexus, which is the top of the energy zone that I call foundation, you have yellow fluorite. And yellow fluorite is actually pretty uncommon. Actually, this is a form that I've seen it in before. You see the yellow is mixed in there with the purple. Often fluorite appears in banded forms, and sometimes there's a color spread. I have some really great wands of just yellow fluorite, and they also have, one of them has a little bit of green running through it. It's good stuff, but I couldn't have it for you to show you today. What I wanted to show you is a relatively newer find. This is true sort of yellow, I call it kind of amber or golden fluorite. And the video reproduction here is making it look a little bit green, but this stuff is very, very nice and is most akin energetically to amber. And of course, if you do check out my other webinars, or we're in touch, or you take a class with me or whatnot, you'll learn that amber is representative of the solar plexus, the positive ego, and the better self. And it's also a lighter stone that sort of tends to lift energies. And so the yellow fluorite is one that I'm sort of exploring, because even though I've been working with crystals for 25 years plus, you can't know it all or pretend to know it all, but you can know enough to speak authoritatively about it. And if you check out my Moldavite, How I Got Into This, the Crystal Visions webinar, you'll also get a sense of how quickly the knowledge came to me, and I've just been fine-tuning it over the years by working with people and working with crystals continuously over that time frame. So before I had discovered this variety of yellow fluorite, I had actually found this variety of yellow fluorite, which is pretty similar, but it's a lot browner, and as a consequence, it goes down in the chakras to lower and associates itself with carnelian energetically. And I'm going to show it to you very closely because it has some very, very interesting geometric terminations. And I was going to shine a flashlight through it. I actually have some photos of it on my website and on the Facebook page, Power Stone Crystals, that shows what this looks like with a light going through it. It's quite impressive, but this is yellow tending towards brown as far as fluorite coloring is concerned. Now, that would be the body fluorites, starting from the heart chakra, going in through the solar plexus and down into the root sacral area. The spirit fluorites are pertaining much more to what I call source, which is the energy zone that is above voice. Okay, so source points north, basically. And there are two kinds I wanted to mention first. There's clear or milky fluorite, which is probably one of the rarest varieties. I'm going to show you this. It's got some little tinges of green in it. And it also has an extremely complex facing structure. It has not been polished or cut at all. This is some very, very good stuff and pretty hard to find. And it pertains in the milky look of it, and some of them are more milky than this one, it would tap down into the heart chakra. And if it's clear, it connects kind of into the sort of topaz, aquamarine, sort of even selenite, those types of more spiritually channeling types of stones. So that's your clear fluorite. And by contrast, I'm going to show you this one here that has a lot of purple in it. And I'll show you that a little bit more closely. You see, this is actually a mix of purple and green, and often, like I said before, the different colors will blend. Now, I don't make as much of the purple fluorite as I could because, first of all, it's very abundant. I don't find it as special as some of the other fluorites. But the other thing about purple fluorite is that it's competing energetically with amethyst. And amethyst is, of course, a spirit connector, sort of spiritual mission guide. And the color is clearer, it's more translucent. There's a lot of different spread in the quality of amethyst. That's why I devoted an entire webinar to it. And so I don't rate the purple fluorite as high as I do some of the other ones. Now, the last two types of fluorites that I want to talk about are blue and green. So I'm going to start with blue because both of these colors and both of these varieties of fluorite are connectors to spirit community. A little bit like your spirit guides, but it's a little bit more abstract than that because it's not about specific individuals or angels or whatnot. It's about that place and that community and that sphere in which your spirit guides operate. So again, you know, I have a long history with this, and time is too short for me to be able to explain all of the basis for why I believe X, Y, and Z. You'll have to take it a little bit at face value when I say, you know, this fluorite pertains more to the body and this fluorite pertains more to the mind or the spirit. But I'm going to show you a couple of blue fluorites that I got. And they're showing a little bit purple, but they're actually lighter and more pale blue live. I got these many, many years ago, probably like 20 years ago. And they're gorgeous. One of them just stands like so. And the other one is just a perfect octahedron, little part shorn off. And these come from Illinois. A lot of the purple fluorite comes from China. A lot of the green comes from China. The yellows come from China. So China is really a good source for a lot of different fluorites. But what's so interesting about this collection, the blue fluorite octahedrons are actually quite rare, and they're not really so available anymore. And I ran into a guy who I bought a blue fluorite from. In fact, this is it right here. It's pretty gigantic. And what was funny to me is that when I put it with the other ones, it started to look like the whole collection came from the exact same mine. So the likelihood of these crystals and this particular color combination being reconnected after 20 years was very appealing to me. Some people spiritually are more blue oriented, and some people are more green oriented. Now, for the people that are very blue oriented, you'll be interested to see this. This is Chinese blue fluorite, very nice stuff. It's actually mixing a little bit with green. And then this other one is more blue than it appears on the screen, and I had the same problem when I photographed it. It looks kind of indigo. And indigo is an integral category of fluorite that is very, very high. It's like it's just above the blue fluorite, and it's in that purple zone like amethyst, but it's a great deal more rare than amethyst. So these are some interesting pieces to have a good look at. You got your blue, you got your indigo, and you got a little bit of green in there. So the combination of the blue with the indigo or the green, of course, has meaning, because the colors, the way that we can experience crystals, and I've mentioned this in one of the webinars, is in three ways. First, through our eyes, our eyesight, color interpretation. Next, through our feel, the weight, the shape, the texture of a crystal. And then the third aspect by which we really can understand crystals is with our imagination, with how we think about it, how we systematize our understanding about crystals. So this here, this is a combination of blue and green fluorite. It's from Mexico. And it's quite magical stuff, actually, because it looks like it has a little bit of purple in there, but that purple is just a real dark blue. And again, the reproduction on the computer screen is not ideal. But you can feel this looks a lot like ocean. So that combination of blue and green that is in the ocean appeals sort of back down into the body chakras through the voice, which is naturally colored blue also, into the body, and the heart chakra, which also has a healthy dose of green in it, between the jade and the malachite, which are associated with that. So if you have any questions, I'd love to see them pop up over in the chat box, because I'm now seeing Sydney's also said something, and that's great. So this is some pretty cool material. But my favorite fluorite of all the fluorites is green fluorite. And usually you see green fluorite either as a little polished piece like this. I'll show you close. You see there's a little bit, it's quite clear, but also looks a little bit like ocean foam. And this is another one. This is a little massage wand, rounded at the bottom, has a point at the top. But notice the color is very uniform, very deep, very good quality green fluorite. And then this, of course, is a heart. Now, I don't usually, I didn't actually, it's changed. I didn't usually care so much for carved hearts, but I've really come to appreciate them because they capture a sort of human understanding about love, and they're also beautiful, and sometimes they're really great colors like this. There's sort of all of those pieces, I think, as well as these pieces. So check this out. It looks a lot like an ocean foam. This is from Madagascar. And Madagascar has been producing some of the most exquisite polished fluorite in the world. Here's another one. This is what we call a flame cut. And it's hard to get enough of these to really even resell them, because they really are special, unique, and hard to replace. But I wanted to share them with you so that you could really see what is awesome about fluorite. You've got your green, you've got your blue, and I'm going to take out as my last piece here, well, maybe two last ones. Remember I showed you this one earlier? If I show it to you real close, you may or may not be able to see some little record keepers. They're little triangular raised etchings on the surface. And you see that piece is a little bit pyramidal, and this piece is a lot pyramidal, which means that you've got a natural octahedron forming here, but it's the vertical aspect of it that's going up. So this is a huge piece, and either this piece could come from several places. It could be from China, but it's a kind of an older piece. This one was definitely from China, and you can't always tell by color because sometimes they're very similar. But this could be from Westmoreland in Vermont, which is a very famous mine out of which fantastic green fluorite has come. And I haven't even begun to sell some of the material that I've been sitting on for years. And another place that has some fantastic fluorite is Peru. And I almost got another piece like this from a friend of mine from Peru. Similar size, similar color, similar termination. This one is a little bit superior in the pyramid formation. But that is what a really stellar and impressive cluster of fluorite looks like. So you've got your green, you've got your blue-green, you've got your blue, and you've got your, that's polished, you've got your octahedron, and you've got your purple, and your clear. Again, that crystallization is very unique, kind of cool. And then you've got your perfect octahedron here in the green color. Showed you that early on. And you've got your brown, which is a yellow, but it's just when it gets thick enough, it just gets super dark. You've got your yellow, and you've got your lavender, and this sort of lavender purple sort of variation, which is kind of cool with those little striations running through it. And last, we're back to the pink. So I'm very excited to have had the opportunity to share all this with you. And I'm seeing a few questions. I have a question about whether fluorite is rare. And actually, there's a lot of fluorite that you can get, cheap, small pieces. But where it becomes more rare is in the color. If you get a really good solid color like this, you're not going to find that every day. And there are certain varieties. I've actually collected much more of this pink fluorite than I've ever seen in any other one place. So if you see that I have a lot of a certain type of fluorite, don't think that that means it's plentiful. It just means that over the course of the years, I've amassed the very, very best of each variety. So I have a question from Sydney. That earlier question was from Anthony. And Sydney asked the question, what is a record keeper and why is it important to be in a crystal? Well, if you do read the existing crystal lore, you will find that people believe that information is encoded and encased inside of those record keepers. Now, I personally believe that the triangle, which also appears in the shape of the octahedron, is meaningful and powerful because it represents 3 dimensions, but because you're in a pyramid, you've added a 4th dimension, and then you're going vertically and you're going downwards too. So to me, if that whole symbolism, that powerful symbolism of the pyramid and the octahedron is showing up in a triangle, in a crystal, and it is pretty rare that that happens. It occurs in fluorite, and I've only ever really seen it, I think, in quartz. And I'm actually thinking of doing my next one of these webinars about quartz points. But that's about as good an answer as I can give you right now about the record keeper. Let me scroll down. Barbara is asking, how rare is emerald green fluorite? Not the jadish look, more the clear. Is it one of the priciest? I also love the indigo, but I assume that it's hard to get. Correct. So the indigo, which you have here, is indeed a very, very hard color to find in fluorite. And you mentioned the jade color. And now jade does get very dark. Nephrite jade, which is one of my favorites, is quite dark and has some black flecks in it. But here you see this is looking lighter than that. And this is actually probably more common than the super dark fluorite. Super dark green fluorite is going to be more rare than this, but what makes this great is the uniformity of color. Because if you're trying to get a certain energy out of a stone, the more, especially fluorite, you want the color to be pretty uniform. Otherwise, what's happening is the stone is giving you mixed messages. And sometimes that can be synergistic, but oftentimes it can just be distracting. So I'm going to scroll up and see if there's any other questions. I see some other stuff. The reason why I put the questions as private is because not everybody asks questions that are like right on point and on topic. And I'm really happy actually that you've asked the questions that you have. You should feel free to email me. It leads to the same inbox, but I have two emails you can use. One is kyle@crystalconcentrics.com, and the other is kyle@powerstonecrystals.com. And what you've done by signing up for this webinar is you have joined our crystal community, and that entitles you to receive my newsletter, which comes out periodically. It's not an all the time kind of thing because I don't want to inundate people. I don't want to bore them. We get so much overload in the email inbox that I don't want you to think of my outreach in that way. So every newsletter is pretty simple. It's straightforward. It talks about upcoming virtual events, upcoming in-person events. I'm based in Boston. And it also talks about some new crystals that I might have. And you should know that even though I have a lot of crystals, I put the pictures up on the Power Stone Crystals page of Facebook, and I also put a lot of crystals onto powerstonecrystals.com, that those virtual offerings are just a fraction, a tip of the iceberg of what I really have. So if you want to follow up, you should definitely be in touch with me, and I can send you some photos of specific pieces that you like. I'm seeing a question here about color, whether color changes over time. And I have, believe me, heard many, many reports about colors of crystals changing. And what happens, like for example, this one, it looks like it changes because to my eye, it's blue and a little green. And to your eye, or at least my computer screen, there's a little indigo and blue there. So there's different ways of interpreting the same piece, but the question had to do with whether crystals change over time because of you wearing them. And absolutely, they have been known to. In my experience, even with amethyst, which a lot of people say amethyst lightens over time, the crystals that I've worked with have remained solidly colored for 25 years. So I do not have that experience, but because we're dealing with something that interacts with our spirit, it's possible also through natural exposure to the sun or the elements leaving something outside that a stone might change color. So I have someone here saying, Sylvia saying that her fluorite crystals change from clear to foggy. So that's a perfect example of the types of things that I've heard about. I'm hearing a question about, would it be rare if it's thermoluminescence? And do you know how that could be determined? You don't have to answer yes. Okay. Well, I don't know about thermoluminescence, but part of the reason why fluorite was named fluorite is because of the word fluorescent. And some fluorites do actually glow in the dark. And that is a very, very cool feature. You sort of light them up and power them up in the daylight, and then in the dark, you'll see them glow. But energetically and for practical purposes of working with crystals on a healing basis, I find that whatever color they are in natural daylight or candlelight, or whenever you're doing work with them, either in meditation or with other people, that's actually just a fine color to work with. So I'm I have a question here about the purpose of the particular fluorite crystals. And I think I've kind of gone over them. I could do a little recap, but what I want to do is keep it short tonight. You will get a replay link. And if any of you don't get to watch all of this, and even if you're busy in the future and you're not able to watch one of these webinars, please know that I make sure I do them almost always on a Thursday, and I keep the replay link live right over through Sunday. So you can tap into it, if not on the night of the live webcast. What you can do is check the replay link or just send me an email. I'm also at crystalconcentrics@gmail. That's easy to remember also. So thank you all for tuning in. Oh, I got another interesting question. Are certain types of crystals overwhelming that give you a burning sensation? Yes, and I recommend that you check out my Crystal Visions Moldavite webinar, because that really tells you a personal story of something that happened to me that's actually very similar to what's happened to some other people in terms of experiencing intense sensations from crystals. For me, working with fluorite is more of a spiritual sensation, more of a sensation of connectedness to higher planes. So that is certainly a valid way of thinking about things. I've got another question here. Do you believe that spirits, this is really fun, and this is exactly why I love having opened this up to a Q&A format. So the beginning is really all about just the fluorite, and I want you to tune in to future webinars so that we can answer your questions then too. But there's some great stuff that I've heard here. Do you believe that spirits are trapped or enclosed in crystals? I love that question. And the short answer is yes and no. Most crystals are merely embodiments of natural energies. People are known for having strong personalities and having spirits and souls that travel through reincarnation, or can move through time and space, or who can sort of embody and possess certain objects or people. So with crystals, that's true also. It's just a little bit less prevalent than I think a lot of people believe. And so it's not always a factor, but it is definitely sometimes a factor. I have a question. Does one color stimulate memory better than another? I think the better way to answer the question of whether a crystal helps your memory is to go back to what I was talking about in terms of the human energy zones. And I do have a poster. You can email me about it, follow up, be in touch. I'm happy to let you know more, send you the link. But what it does is it divides the chakra system into 4 main groupings. The foundation, which is from the solar plexus down, the heart chakra, the voice, and the source. So in order to really understand memory per se, you kind of have to get to a better understanding about all the different chakras. And I do consultations. I do something called a crystal reading, which is not just a reading in the sense of a psychic's reading that tells you things about your future or your past or your present that they might not otherwise have known. They just intuitively tap into you. That's not my style. What I like to do is ask people questions, and based on the answers that you give me, I can make recommendations of crystals to work with. And also I can send you photographs of them, or if we're in person, you can actually sit with them in progression. I have a whole set of services that I offer, which you can learn about at crystalconcentrics.com. And you can also check out powerstonecrystals.com. So I think the last question I'm going to get to answer is, I've been burning fluorite incense. Is that like the same? Well, that's an excellent question. And what that taps into is the whole question of gem elixirs. And that's something that I mentioned in, I think, my Crystal Myths webinar. People make elixirs of gems. And apparently people are making incense that are inspired by the gems as well. To me, it's just a name, and it's cool to infuse water with the gem energy, but my preference is always to go straight for the gem. Because, you know, it's like say you want to eat an apple or a banana, and someone tells you, well, I can put the apple in water, not crush it or make it into an apple sauce. I can just put the apple in water and you can drink the water, or we can make an incense that smells a little like an apple. Well, ultimately, you're going to want to, if you really want to feel the essence of the apple, you're going to actually eat the apple. Now, we can't actually eat crystals, but we can certainly hold them. And like I was saying before, between the touch and the sight and the imagination, you can synthesize information about it and use it in your life. So I want to try to keep it a little bit short. We're up to 45 minutes, which is great because all my other webinars were at least an hour long. I want to keep these short and fun and informative and interactive. So I really, really appreciate all of your questions. And I want you to know that you can feel free to email me questions, and I'm happy to get back to you. And also, before the next webinar, which I'm current thinking is going to be about quartz crystal points, because there's a lot of variety in quartz crystal points, and there's a lot of interesting things to say about them. You can feel free to email questions in advance, especially if you're not going to be there live. I'll be able to answer the questions during the actual event. And keep an eye out to your inbox. Please add me as a contact to your list of contacts, your address book, so that my communications don't get lost in your spam folder. So I look forward to hearing from you again. I'm Kyle Russell, and I have crystalconcentrics.com and powerstonecrystals.com, and Kyle at either one of those will get to my inbox so that we can keep our conversation going. Welcome to the Crystal community and the very first episode of the Why It's Awesome series. Thanks again, and have a good one.